I've always been interested in the US interstate system, so I wanted to talk about the 10 longest interstates in America. I know it's been a couple of months since I've posted a video, and I'm sorry for that. I was dealing with some things in my personal life, and the holidays got really busy and stressful, but now I'm back, and I plan to be more consistent and talk about more interesting facts about American infrastructure, things that I'm interested in, whatever I want to talk about. Gonna change a little bit of things. Talk about some roads, maybe some railroads. If you're interested in railroads, let me know. I'm kind of interested in talking about railroads or anything else. I mean, there's a lot of things I could talk about. I could talk about more bridges. I just want to talk about infrastructure. I think that's really cool. And this is also like the second or third time that I've tried to record this because I just keep talking too fast because I haven't done this in a while. So if I'm talking too fast, please forgive me. I'm trying to slow down. All right. Well, let's get into it. How about that? The 10th longest interstate in the US is Interstate 20. The easternmost point intersects with Interstate 10 in Texas, while the westernmost point intersects with Interstate 95 in Florence, South Carolina. This interstate was built in 1957 and passes through the states of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. The total length of Interstate 20 is 1,539 miles long, with the longest section in Texas. Of course it's in Texas. Where else would it be? With a length of 636 miles. In 2003, North Carolina wanted to extend Interstate 20 from Florence, South Carolina to Wilmington on the Atlantic coast in North Carolina, which would follow US Highway 76 through South Carolina and US Highway 74 in North Carolina, which you can see on the map here. But South Carolina stated they had no interest in upgrading US Highway 76 to interstate standards. And I happen to agree with South Carolina on this one, as upgrading US 76 to interstate standards would be a massive undertaking and displace a lot of these homes within Florence and other towns nearby. Well, let's just get a move on to the 9th longest interstate in the US, which is Interstate 35. The southernmost point intersects with US Highway 83 in Laredo, Texas, while the northernmost point intersects with Minnesota State Highway 61 in Duluth, Minnesota. This interstate was built in 1956 and passes through the states of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, and Minnesota. The total length of Interstate 35 is 1,568 miles long, with the longest section again, and of course, being Texas, with a length of 504 miles. The crazy thing about this interstate is it splits into 35W and 35E twice. One of the splits is in Texas, where I-35W goes through Fort Worth and I-35E goes to Dallas. The second split is in Minnesota, where I-35W goes through Minneapolis and I-35E goes through St. Paul. While this interstate is considered a border-to-border interstate, it technically does not touch either the Canadian or Mexican border. The 8th longest interstate in the US is Interstate 94, which just so happens to pass through my home state. The easternmost point intersects with Interstate 90 in Lockwood, Montana, while the westernmost point intersects with Highway 402 at the Canadian border in Port Huron, Michigan. The total length of Interstate 94 is 1,585 miles long, with the longest section surprisingly being in my home state of North Dakota, with a length of 352 miles. Interstate 94 is the only east-west interstate to have a direct connection to Canada. The 7th longest interstate in the US is Interstate 75. The southernmost point intersects with State Route 826 in Miami Lakes, Florida. The northernmost point intersects with the Canadian border. This interstate was built in 1958 and passes through the states of Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, and Michigan. The total length of Interstate 75 is 1,786 miles long, with the longest section in Florida having a length of 470 miles. This interstate originally was supposed to end in Tampa, but due to huge growth in southwest Florida, the interstate was extended south to Naples and turned east to Miami. The 6th longest interstate in the US is Interstate 95. The southernmost point intersects US Highway 1 in Miami, Florida, while the northernmost point intersects the Canadian border at Houlton, Maine. This interstate was built in 1957 and passes through the states of Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine. The total length of Interstate 95 is 1,919 miles long and is the longest north-south interstate in America. The longest section of Interstate 95 is in Florida with a length of 382 miles. Interstate 95 passes through mostly dense urban areas and serves a whopping 110 million people, which is absolutely insane, and facilitates 40% of the country's GDP, which is another crazy insane stat for this interstate highway. Wow. I think Interstate 95 is pretty important to this country. What do you guys think? The fifth longest interstate in the US is Interstate 70. The westernmost point intersects Interstate 15 in Cove Fort, Utah, while the easternmost point intersects with Interstate 695 in Woodlawn, Maryland. This interstate was built in 1956 and passes through the states of Utah, Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. The total length of Interstate 70 is 2,172 miles long, with the longest section in Colorado with a length of 450 miles. The construction of Interstate 70 is considered an engineering marvel, with the route passing through the Eisenhower Tunnel, which is also the highest elevation on the entire interstate system. It also passes through Glenwood Canyon and the San Rafael Swell. The fourth longest interstate in the US is Interstate 10. The westernmost point intersects with State Route 1 in Santa Monica, California. The easternmost point intersects with Interstate 95 in Jacksonville, Florida. This interstate was built in 1957 and passes through the states of California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. The total length of Interstate 10 is 2,460 miles long, with the longest section, of course, everybody knows it's Texas, with a total length of 881 miles, which just so happens to be more than a third of the total length of the entirety of Interstate 10. The route existed since 1957, but the last section was completed in Phoenix in 1990. The third longest interstate in the US is Interstate 40. The westernmost point intersects with Interstate 15 in Barstow, California, while the easternmost point intersects with US Highway 117 in Wilmington, North Carolina. This interstate was built in 1964 and passes through the states of California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina. The total length of Interstate 40 is 2,556 miles long, with the longest section being, of course, again, it's in Texas. Texas is just so big, and I'm just pulling your leg because it's actually in Tennessee with a length of 455 miles. Much of the western part of Interstate 40 overlays or parallels historic US Route 66. The second longest interstate in the US is Interstate 80. The westernmost point intersects with US Highway 101 in San Francisco, while the easternmost point intersects with Interstate 95 in Teaneck, New Jersey. This interstate was built in 1956 and passes through the states of California, Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. The total length of Interstate 80 is 2,899 miles long, with the longest section in Nebraska with a length of 455 miles. Interstate 80 most closely follows the route of the historic Lincoln Highway, which is the first road across the United States. It also roughly follows other historic travel routes such as parts of the Oregon Trail, parts of the California Trail, parts of the first transcontinental airmail route, and parts of the first transcontinental railroad. The longest interstate in the US is Interstate 90. The westernmost point intersects with State Route 519 in Seattle, Washington. The The easternmost point intersects with MA1A in Boston, Massachusetts. This interstate was built in 1956 and passes through the states of Washington, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and Massachusetts. Now, is this interstate over 3,000 miles? Yeah, it is. It's actually 3,020 miles. It just barely passed 3,000 miles. That's awesome. The longest section of Interstate 90 is in Montana with 552 miles. No surprises there. 25% of Interstate 90 is toll roads, which are all contained from the Wisconsin-Illinois state line to Massachusetts. And I'm really glad I don't live over that way because I hate toll roads. Well, did any of these interstates on this list of longest interstates surprise you? I think Interstate 35 is the most interesting and unique as it splits in two different cities to I-35W and I-35E. Let me know if you want me to cover any other topics such as railroads, more bridges, or anything else. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And make sure you follow the light of the world.